There's a voice that lives inside you. It doesn't scream, it doesn't threaten, it whispers, just low enough to sound like intuition, just familiar enough to pass for truth. It won't work. You've tried before. Don't bother. Better not mess with that now. You nod, you agree, you obey, not because it makes sense, but because it sounds like safety, like a survival instinct disguised as a mentor. But what if that voice isn't you? What if it's just the mind echoing your oldest fear, that changing means dying? The mind doesn't care about your happiness. It cares about repetition, familiarity, control. And when you decide to grow, evolve, or step outside the frame it knows, it panics, not with fire or alarms, but with soft sabotage. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And fate, in this context, is just the name we give to patterns we're too tired to question. That's why your comfort zone doesn't feel safe. It feels like a battlefield where you lost and decided never to fight again. You built a life around that truce. You became predictable, silent, numb. You called it stability. You called it being realistic. But deep down, you feel it. The slow decay. The existential exhaustion of staying the same while dying a little more each day. So ask yourself, not with drama, not with guilt, just with brutal honesty, when was the last time you wanted to change, and your own mind convinced you it was safer to keep slowly dying? Because that's where we begin, in that crack between intention and sabotage, in the silence where the real war hides. The most dangerous patterns are the ones that feel protective. You wake up, and a shadow speaks before you do. It suggests that you wait a bit longer, that now is not the time, that maybe you're just tired, not lost. But behind that calm tone is an ancient reaction, a primal calculation. Change equals danger. Your brain doesn't distinguish between a real threat and emotional uncertainty. It reacts to new routines, new beliefs, and new identities the way it would react to fire. It screams quietly for you to retreat, and so you obey, not because it feels right, but because the alternative feels like death. This is the invisible cycle. You feel pain. You try to change. The voice resists. You sabotage yourself. You feel guilt and return to the pain. It's a loop that wears your name, but doesn't come from you. It was programmed, not chosen. An old mechanism meant to keep you alive, but now it only keeps you stuck. This voice is not rational. It doesn't care about evidence. It doesn't care how badly you want it. It cares only about preserving the version of you that has survived until now, even if that version is fractured and fading. It's like trying to escape a burning house, but the house itself begs you to stay, tells you it's better here, that the fire is familiar, that outside it's colder, riskier, that maybe you're not ready to breathe air that doesn't burn. So you stay, in a house that smells like memory and soot, telling yourself it's home. But what if safety isn't safe? What if the only thing more dangerous than the unknown is pretending you're not already on fire? No one is born with a voice that says, "You'll never be enough." That voice was stitched into you, not in one moment, but over time, through repetition. Each criticism, each rejection, each silent punishment became a thread, and eventually you wore it like a second skin. What began as external became internal. What others said became what you believed. You didn't agree, you absorbed. Children don't analyze, they survive. And to survive, your mind learned to record pain as instruction. It didn't ask if it was fair, it asked how to avoid it again. You're not smart. You always ruin things. You're too sensitive. You'll never be like them. Words that should have never become truth, but did. Because they repeated, because they hurt, because they came when you were too young to realize they were lies. Now you don't need anyone to insult you. You do it yourself, quietly, automatically. You hear a voice, but it's not intuition. It's the echo of someone who hurt you, pretending to be your conscience. And the tragedy is this: you think it's you. You think the doubt, the hesitation, the cruel whisper that paralyzes you is part of your identity, but it's not. It's inherited, programmed, installed. Until you separate who you are from who hurt you, you'll keep living under ghost orders, rules written by people who never knew your worth. So if you've ever wondered why you sabotage yourself, ask first, whose voice is speaking? And then ask, what part of me is still trying to earn love by staying broken? You don't wake up and choose to waste your life. No one does. But there are mornings when the weight on your chest is heavier than the desire to move. And the voice returns. You're just lazy. You never finish anything. You'll never change. You believe it. You internalize the failure. You wear it. But what if that paralysis isn't laziness? What if it's your mind's last defense? Procrastination isn't about time. It's about protection. It's not the task you fear. It's the truth it might reveal. Because if you try and fail, the voice wins. But if you don't try, you can still pretend it's not real. You're not avoiding action. You're avoiding collapse. The collapse of the fragile identity you've built to cope, because deep down, the real fear isn't failure, it's confirmation. Confirmation that even when you give your best, you'll still feel unworthy, still feel empty, still feel like something inside you is missing, and always has been. So you wait, you stall, you find distractions, not because you don't care, but because caring might hurt more. It's not laziness, it's grief. Grief for a self that wanted to believe. Grief for all the times you tried and it didn't work. Grief for the quiet hope you buried because you couldn't stand to watch it die again. You're not afraid to start. You're afraid to prove the voice right. But here's the truth the voice can't say. Even if you fail again, you won't be broken. You're not the result. You're the one still here, beneath it all. There's a point when pain stops feeling like an emotion and starts feeling like who you are. You no longer say, I feel empty. You say, I am empty. You no longer say, I failed. You say, I am a failure. It's subtle, but it's devastating, because now you're not just carrying pain, you're becoming it. And once your suffering becomes your identity, change feels like betrayal, like killing the only version of yourself that knows how to survive, like letting go of a mask that fused with your skin, even if that mask suffocates you. Even if that version of you is slowly eroding everything you dream of becoming. So you resist, not because you love the pain, but because the pain is familiar. It's mapped into your nervous system. It's become the shape your self-worth takes when nothing else feels solid. If I change, your mind whispers, I'll disappear. I won't recognize myself. I won't belong. So you sabotage. You delay healing. You protect the identity built in the dark, even as it poisons the light you secretly crave. It's like living in a prison cell you've painted with memories and called home, decorated with stories of who hurt you, furnished with the silence of every moment you weren't seen. You tell yourself it's safer here, that outside it's too much. But the truth is, this identity, this pain-made self, is killing you quietly. And maybe the real reason you can't change is because part of you still believes that the pain gives you value, that if you heal, you'll be nothing, that if you grow, you'll be alone. But who you are is not the wound, it's the one who felt it and is still alive. You're told to be authentic, to be yourself, as if that's always a form of freedom, as if who you are today couldn't be the product of wounds you've mistaken for personality. But what if the self you're being loyal to is already gone? What if it's just a collection of habits, fears, and inherited beliefs stitched together in the shape of a person? The voice in your head says, this is who you are, that this sadness is just you being deep, that this numbness is just how you process, that this detachment is just how you survive. You call it identity. But sometimes it's just defense. Because there's a version of you that was born from pain and learned how to walk through the world without asking too many questions. That version had to exist. It protected you. It gave you language, rules, survival strategies. But now, it's outdated. It's still reacting to ghosts, still building walls in places where doors could open. You're being authentic, yes, but authentic to a self that no longer serves your becoming. And maybe that's the real crisis. The deeper you go into being yourself, the more you realize that self was built in a house of mirrors. What if real authenticity isn't about repeating what you feel, but about questioning where those feelings were born? Not everything that feels familiar is true, and not everything you've called you is sacred. Sometimes the most authentic thing you can do is admit that the person you've become was a survival script, not a final draft. And that maybe, to live fully, you'll have to betray the version of you that never had the chance to grow. The mind doesn't search for truth. It searches for what it already knows, even if what it knows is pain, even if what it knows is failure, even if what it knows is the quiet echo of self-betrayal. It's not because your mind hates you, it's because for the mind, survival means repetition. It would rather endure the same misery again than risk the terror of the unknown. And so, you find yourself circling the same patterns, not because they work, but because they're mapped emotionally, chemically, historically. Every time you try to change, your body remembers. It remembers the fear, the judgment, the collapse. And the voice returns, disguised as logic. Let's not do this now. You're not ready. It's just not who you are. But this voice isn't guidance. It's a security system, one that mistakes evolution for threat, one that equates transformation with extinction. So you stay, not out of ignorance but out of instinct. You repeat what doesn't work because your mind whispers, "At least here, we know how to bleed." The irony is cruel. The thing that's killing you is the same thing your mind thinks is keeping you alive. It's not your happiness the brain prioritizes. It's your survival. And if your survival was once tied to silence, invisibility, or self-erasure, it will keep choosing that, even if the cost is your becoming. This is why change hurts, not just emotionally, but biologically. The body resists, the mind doubts, the voice panics, because every step forward is a step away from the identity you were conditioned to protect, even if that identity was built inside a cage. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. There's a silence that feels like peace, and there's a silence that feels like collapse. At first, when you stop running, when the distractions fade, when the noise quiets, there's a relief, a stillness. But then the tremors begin. The thoughts get louder. The voice you tried to bury starts whispering again, because silence for a mind addicted to survival feels like death. Not metaphorically, literally, when you're no longer acting out your routines, your roles, your rehearsed stories. Something inside begins to unravel. The false self starts to dissolve. The protective layers begin to fall. And what's left is you, unmasked, unfiltered, unprotected. And for many, that's terrifying. So you return to the scrolling, the numbing, the endless planning, the overthinking. You call it life, you call it responsibility, but deep down, it's escape. Because in the silence, something ancient awakens. The part of you that remembers what you gave up, the self that never had a voice, the truth you never dared to speak. And it asks questions no noise can drown out. What have you postponed with clever excuses? What have you sacrificed in the name of not rocking the boat? What have you forgotten just to keep feeling safe? Sometimes sabotage doesn't look like destruction. Sometimes it looks like logic, like being reasonable, like waiting for the perfect moment that never comes. And when the mind runs out of words to distract you, it offers silence as a trap. But that silence might be your only doorway out. If you're willing to stay in it long enough to hear what you've been avoiding, there's a moment, quiet, almost imperceptible, when you realize the voice in your head isn't a command. It's a sound, a pattern, a memory disguised as instinct. You hear it. This won't work. You'll mess it up. They'll see who you really are. And you react, not because it's true, but because it's familiar. This is the hypnosis of identity, believing every thought is yours, accepting every fear as truth, confusing the speaker with the self. But you are not the voice. You are the awareness that hears it. The difference is everything, because the voice isn't evil. It's just unexamined. It's a defense system made from past pain, operating on old rules. And when you believe it blindly, you give it power it doesn't deserve. Try listening without obeying. Let the sentence arise, and instead of reacting, ask, who is speaking? Me, or my fear of becoming someone I've never allowed myself to be? This is the birth of the observer, the one who watches, the one who questions, the one who interrupts the ancient script. You don't have to fight the voice, you don't have to silence it. You only have to remember that it's not your inner God. It's just noise until you give it meaning. And in that space between the voice and your reaction is the first breath of freedom you've been chasing all your life. You wake up each day inside a story you didn't write. One built from echoes, shaped by fear, narrated by a voice that sounds like you and but isn't. You obey it, not because it makes you happy, but because it keeps you hidden. And hidden feels safer than free. But what if this prison doesn't exist? What if it's made of thoughts, of conclusions drawn in moments of weakness, of identities crafted in the shadows of survival? The pain is real, the anxiety, the guilt, the feeling of never being enough. But the rules you follow, the bars around you, they're imagined, they're inherited, and every day you obey them, they tighten. You're not weak for struggling to change. You're exhausted from living a script written by pain. And like Jung warned, when the unconscious is not made conscious, it becomes fate. Not because it's destiny, but because it's repetition. To change is to die, not your body, but the character you've been playing, the protector, the achiever, the failure, the ghost. It hurts, yes, because even the prison gave you a role, and stepping out means walking into the unknown without a mask, without applause, without guarantee. But here's the last truth. The voice in your head doesn't want you to change, because change would mean it's no longer needed. And still, it's not too late to stop listening, to walk out quietly, without permission. The door has always been open. The lock was never real, and now in this silence between thoughts, something ancient in you whispers back, I was never the voice. I was the one who survived it.